when you're in the moment, when you literally feel that heat, when you've got the anxiety rush over because something got effed up, that is the most important moment. Take a deep breath and ask yourself the question, what could I have done about this? And you start from there. That is so important. Hi, Lynette.
Hey, Lorne, how are you?
You can see that I've worn my shirt and tie for a whole week. We're going to talk about, wouldn't it be cool if we could take a value like self-accountability and have it, we could be so self-aware in the moment of the heat of the battle that would arrive for us when we need it. And it's hard, and it's hard. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that, because I think people know that, much to sometimes people's annoyance, that I really have this deep belief in the importance of self-accountability, that the first question when things go wrong to ask is, what can I do about it? That's the most important question.
So regardless if it was a situation caused by you or something else, it's sort of taking ownership of it and asking, what can I do to help?
Yeah, what could I have done? And it's hard. And because in the heat of battle, I think it's, it's very, very understandable, sometimes, reasonable to feel very defensive and to try and protect yourself. And it's hard. So, I've started a new role as the Chief Culture and Transformation Officer in a really interesting community college here that I think has a chance to have a global impact in the Edmonton. Well, it's centered out of Edmonton, Alberta, called Northwest. And, and I always make it a point not to share inappropriate information about places that I work at. It's not, however, it's a living lab for me. And this is about me. This is not about Northwest. And I'd like to just share that experience. It happened to be at Northwest. Yesterday, I made a mistake. And we were ending up posting a job, and I didn't proof the final post, and it got up there, and it was the wrong posting, and it really made some people feel very uncomfortable. It made it look like I was, recruiting for jobs that were an incumbent job, and it really impacted some people, and it caused people to get upset, appropriately, understandably. And but there are a lot of groups involved in getting that posting up there, and I won't go through them all. It's just and so here's my point with this, is that how I responded to that situation, it was a moment of truth. And when you're a new person in a role, it's even bigger. Moments arrive when you have to, and I hope I did the right thing, and I'll be curious how you feel about it, and and I'd love to hear your reaction to it. My comment was that I apologized, because I said at the end of the day, regardless of who was involved in getting that posting up, I owned it. With my posting, there's a posting for position in my group. I own it, and I didn't literally put the posting up. Doesn't matter. I own it. And I think by taking that position that I genuinely feel, it's my response. The first question is, wait a minute. Why didn't I take, I'm too much of in a hurry. I should have took a moment. I was pushing the time. It would take me less than 3 minutes to read that properly, make sure that it was right. But in the spirit of wanting to delegate it and to get it out there, I just, think, they got it. And I own it. I own it. And I think, by putting that out there, I think it set the right tone, I think, of the people responding. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is, sure, you can own it because you are sort of the leader at the top, like the sort of the buck ends here kind of thing. But I also, there's part of me that feels like it's a bit patronizing, to be honest. And I don't know if that's the right word for it, but I feel like, sure, you own it, but I think more so what is happening underneath that statement that causes it to not happen again. And, there's so many times I've heard, you hire people because of the skills that they bring and to do the job that you've hired them to do. As a leader, you need to let them do that, right? So if you're always overseeing and like, and micromanaging. So I really don't know what happens after you say I own it, Lorne.
Yeah, no, that's a right question. I was listening to a presentation, and I can't remember. It's worth repeating if I did in a previous podcast, from Tom Chi, and Tom was one of the first Google 8 leaders of their Google X. All the moonshot people, and he was there with Astro Teller and Sergey, the founder of Google, and I mean, they're really, really super people. And they don't use the word fail fast. They use the phrase learn fast.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're talking about here. So it's not about, it's not just the self accountability piece, is to ask myself, what would I do? Well, what I won't do is I won't say, well, I'll put more inspection in.
Right.
That's not the answer. I don't want to go take the autonomy away from these wonderful people. But I should have, but what I will do is I'll slow down a little bit to get it right, and to make sure that I've done the right thing to get the content in the way, and not just to send it over. I'll probably do something a little bit more complete around, making sure and saying, well, let's just make sure that we're kind of on the same page around the content we're going to use around it. So I might ask that question differently next time.
Yeah.
But what I'm not going to do is, well, I'm going to read every one of these things, and don't you put anything up there again before I check it or inspect it, because we'll just build waste into the system. Now, the reciprocal thing is that I want to just, and again, I don't want to talk out of school about my colleagues, but what I want to do is I want to compliment them the way they responded. Every person involved responded by saying, holy cow, here's what I could have done. And I think that builds teamwork. I felt like we were a team after around fixing it fast and learning fast.
Yeah, I like that, learning fast. So what could you do? So what are you going to do as this new leader to bring this new culture, sort of elevate the culture, so to instill that self-accountability, moving away from, you as the leader ultimately own it, to creating this environment of learn fast?
Well, I think one of the things is to set the example around how to respond to these situations. I think what happens is that, and I've seen this in how easy it is when the pressure hits, and there's lots of pressure in organizations, and you'll hear this at meetings, top level meetings, and you'll hear people going, well, the reason I couldn't get done, and there's some other reason out there, and it's not that person, right? Or they don't ask the question around, here's what and of course, we're usually a little more subtle around pointing the finger directly at each other. We're usually a little bit more, diplomatic about the point is that, hey, it wasn't me. And I think that slows everything down.
Yeah.
And I think what happens is that then it starts to really become a culture of blame. And so the very first thing is that, model it, own it, and help the situation move from blame, which is waste, to fast learning.
Right.
Everywhere you can, and look for those situations. And I think once you start to create those conditions, that really takes hold, because I think people want that.
Yeah, and so to me, what I'm hearing you say is that there's a new value that you're going to bring to this organization, Norquest, which is going to be fast learning, and potentially this sort of culture that there's no one to blame.
Yeah,
right?
and I hope, I hope I add to it. I think it'd be arrogant for me to think that, I'm going to be this great bastion, but I hope I add to it. Well,
I think you are going to add to it. And I think the fast learn for you is, in my personal opinion, and this might be a bit, you might not like me when I say this, but I don't think you should say that anymore. I owned it. I own this. I honestly don't think you should say it. For some reason, it just does not sit well with me, that statement. I think that having a conversation around fast learning, identifying the fact that there might have been, where, we're not going to blame anybody, we're going to blame as a group, or, we're going to own this as a group. But I don't think, I don't know. That's just my feedback for you, Lorne.
I appreciate that. I'm not sure I'm a big fan of now, which is a kind of worn out phrase that almost becomes a throwaway. I own it. I don't know if I'm a big fan of that. I use it. I wish I used it less. I
Yeah.
think I think the more important thing is the question I ask after. The first
Yeah,
question
that I agree.
I ask myself is, what could I've done? And I think it's important from personal relationships all the way up through to business relationships. I think we're so good at when we have, of course, in a personal context, it's pretty easy to get in an argument with someone, you live with,
Yeah.
and pretty soon you get into, and it starts like, I wish you would, or why don't you do, or I see you do this. And I think now it starts the conversation. Well, no, I don't, or you're exaggerating, or But I think when you start looking at a situation, you start the question around, what can I do about that? I think it starts to change the tone of the conversation.
Yeah, and maybe as a leader, what do you think we could have done differently to avoid something like this?
And so I'll push back a little bit on the we. Sometime I think it needs to start. I think there should be what could we have, but I'm going to start with what I could have, and because there is a we there, but I was there.
Yeah. So sorry, I just want to get clarity on that. So you are meeting with your team. You've identified this as a problem. The first thing you could have said or would say next time, I guess, would be, this is what I think I could have done differently. And that sort of modeling behavior that you're hoping other people would pick up on to model that same behavior. Okay, well, that's great. So he's owning that piece of it, or he's owning a piece of it. I'm going to own it too. Here's what I could have done differently. So together you've really created this sort of conversation around failing fast kind of thing.
And it ties to the psychological safety piece on that. I found my previous teams, and you're quite good at it yourself. You're happy to pile on and help me and add a little bit more to it after I say it too. So,
yeah, that's true.
But what it does is starts the tone. It's okay. It's it's a bridge in the relationship, and then what you find is that these more difficult conversations are more accessible because it's not making it about how much armor you can put at yourself or how good you are at fighting by blaming the other person. It ends up being how good you are because how you can come together and put your pieces together to learn fast.
Yeah, and I think that, and to build on that psychological safety piece of it, to have those types of conversations in that psychological safety and safe environment, it means that you're really doing it to help them get better, right? To help everyone be better. And you don't have to sort of fiddle around with like, oh, well, I hurt their feelings because I say something. They know that I'm saying this as a sort of an opportunity to elevate their game. So I think
and I think, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted you just sparked something, an important thing when you said that, is that as we talk about these moving organizations and people forward, the one thing I have to remind myself, the biggest person I have to work on is me.
Mm-hmm.
And if all of a sudden I get caught up in my title or my position and think I'm bringing all this wisdom to everybody else and that kind of stuff, I forget, hey, wait a minute. You got lots of stuff to work on yourself first. Then you earn the right to share some of that or give some insight. Then I think it builds more credibility, and I think people bring you into the fold more. So that's a little bit of my thinking.
Yeah, it's great. So Lorne, 3 things that people can think about after this vlog.
Lynette, on the self-accountability piece, remember that it's the first of all, when you're in the heat of the fire, when you're in the moment, when you literally feel that heat, when you've got the anxiety rush over because something got effed up, that is the most important moment. Take a deep breath and ask yourself the question, what could I have done about this? And you start from there. That is so important. And then the second thing is that is to take that action in a way that is, because you said it, be genuine about it. Don't be patronizing, or because people will see right through that. If you go, oh, I own it, but then really underneath it, you're just going, screwed up. People will get that. So you've really got to own it. And I think the third thing is, geez, be humble and realize that you're not going to get there all the time. You're going to we're human. Sometimes you just get defensive and you just go, I didn't do that. You screwed up. And that's just a normal part of thing, but allow yourself to kind of observe that it happened and then keep going. And it's life, right? It's what makes this interesting, what makes working together and learning how to love each other more richer now I'm getting into the love word, which is gross. That's what happens when the tie gets too restricted. But anyway, it's fun
All right,
talking.
Lauren. Well, that's great. I love this session. It was awesome. Yeah, sorry if I piled on too much there earlier.
I appreciate it. I think that's what made it rich. I think we owe it to our audience to talk like we talk when we're debating this stuff, and let open the window and let them in with us, right? Because that's I'm hoping that they enjoy that part of it. Thanks. Great to spend time.
Okay, great seeing you. Have a great day, Lauren.
Yeah.
Bye.